Fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. If you want it, come and get some. Because we love wisdom. Because we love wisdom.
People in every part of the globe are perishing because their judgment is low. From children to teens to elderly folks, this epidemic is incredibly bold. Wisdom is needed to see through the fog. Without it, we'll stumble and cease to the long. You're jumping without something to break and fall if you choose to ignore wisdom's beckoning call. The only people who will lose the war are those who don't know who they're fighting for. You are the only one who can decide your fate. Don't waste your life when you can live inside of grace. If we turn to God and behold his shining face, we will gain traction to run in this human race.
Hey, what's going on? JC Johnson here, and we are getting ready to discuss the wisdom of organism. What does that mean, and how can we apply it to our lives?
Fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. If you want it, come and get some. Because we love wisdom. Because we love wisdom. Fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. If you want it, come and get some. Because we love wisdom. Because we love wisdom.
All right, what's going on? Welcome back. You're listening to For the Love of Wisdom, where philosophy meets the streets. And on the last show, we discussed humanitarianism. And right now, we're going to look at organism, the wisdom of organism, being an organism. What is an organism, right? Why are we talking about organisms? What does that have to do with anything? Well, I'm going to answer that soon. The theme verse for this show comes from Psalm 90, verse 12, and it says, "Teach us to number our days carefully, so that we may develop wisdom in our hearts." And according to Merriam Webster's dictionary, wisdom is all about being able to make good judgments. It's about having the ability to discern, and basically the quality of having experience, knowledge, and good judgment. That's what wisdom is all about. And this show, For the Love of Wisdom, is all about this idea of loving wisdom, which comes from the Greek words philo and sophos, which literally mean love and wisdom. So love of wisdom. And we are in a series right now where each of our shows are an ism, right? So in the last season, every show ended with ITY. That was the suffix. And now every show title is going to end with ISM or ism. And ism comes from the Greek origin, ismos or isma. And it went later to French, which is isme. And now to English, which is ism. And, last time when we discussed humanitarianism, we looked at Russell Salvatore, who won the Humanitarian of the Year award. And he said, "I don't need no money when I go up to heaven," right? He said, "The least you can do when we get there, you can buy me a cocktail." So he's being a little tongue-in-cheek there. I don't know if they even have cocktails in heaven, but hey, we'll find out, right? But what he was saying basically is, hey, it doesn't matter if I get a reward for this in this life. I know I'm going to be taken care of in the next life. And that's what it's all about. If you missed that episode or any others, it's cool because you can always listen to them online. You can go on iTunes, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Google Play Music, pretty much anywhere where podcasts are located. If you have an Amazon device, you can say, "Alexa, play For the Love of Wisdom," and you can bring up the show hands-free. So when it comes to organism, what is an organism? All right, Merriam Webster's dictionary defines organism as a complex structure of interdependent and subordinate elements whose relations and properties are largely determined by their function in the whole. So basically, it is taking a whole bunch of unrelated stuff and putting it together and making it function as one. So basically, if you have 10,000 different parts, you're putting all 10,000 parts together. And when you put it together, you can no longer say they're 10,000 parts, but they operate as one organism, one living, breathing thing. So there's an article that was written by onelordonebody.com, and they discuss this whole idea of organization versus organism as it relates to the church. And I think that this is so important. This is something that I think that all of us need a greater understanding on, because when we think of church, a lot of times we are thinking about this big building with pews and tithes and offerings and, you know, the music and all this stuff. But what is the church really? What does the Bible really say about what it's supposed to be? Well, the Bible, believe it or not, it actually doesn't discuss the church as a 501c3 nonprofit organization. It actually speaks about it as an organism, a living, breathing organism, something that is not regulated by the government or anyone else for that matter, but it's something ultimately that is under the leadership of God. That's what the original vision was for the church. And I think that this is important because even if you're not someone who goes to church, I think that it's important to at least understand what church is supposed to be about, so that if you're going to make your decision about whether or not you want to be a part of something, you should have all the facts. So one thing this article does is it breaks it down by offering the differences between organisms and organizations. And what they're saying here is that basically they're sensitive to the fact that sometimes ministries can use or even abuse people to advance someone else's vision of success or their desire for notoriety. And this is really honest, and I think that they are being vulnerable in this sense that, you know, they're not trying to make the church look bad or you know, trying to, you know, speak poorly of ministries, but basically they're saying they're aware, they're conscious of the fact that there are a lot of people who are rubbed the wrong way by churches because they feel like, man, it's all about money. You know, all they want to do is get in my pockets. They don't really care about the people. And in some instances, that's true. Not in all cases, but in some cases it's true. And what they're trying to say here is that, you know, that bad experience that you may have had with the church is not the representation of what all churches are about, because there are places out there who truly do have a heart for people and who are trying to do the right thing. So here's what they have to say about that. They give these differences by saying basically a church family is an organism and a church business is an organization, because the church is supposed to be like a family. So what are the differences? A church business is connected organizationally, where a church family is connected relationally. A church business is a mechanical environment, but a church family is an organic environment. A church business puts emphasis on doing, whereas a church family puts emphasis on being. And that's a really good one right there. A church business is reproduction by manufacturing, whereas a church family, reproduction by nature. A church business is accepting of those who produce, whereas a church family is accepting of all in the family. A church business accepts certain people, whereas a church family accepts all ages or accepts everyone. A church business success is measured by numbers and income, whereas in a church family, success is measured by relationships. In a church business, it's all about administrative and business leadership, whereas in a church family, it's about spiritual or parental leadership. In a church business, there are tangible assets and accomplishments. So you got staff, buildings, income, and equipment. Whereas in a church family, there are invisible virtues and attributes: love, trust, faithfulness, honesty, and patience. And the last big distinction they make here is that a church business, their economic engine is tithes and offerings, whereas a church family, their spiritual engine is the Spirit of God, the Holy Spirit, right? That's the one who gives power to them to do whatever it is that they do that's good in the world. And I think that was pretty awesome. The breakdown that they gave right there of the differences between an organism and an organization. And they basically say here that, they understand that it's not always this way in every church, but what they're trying to say is at least have the information, be discerning so that you can see the difference. They say here that they believe they have a unique calling and that they've made a decision that people or the family are more important than the organization. And I agree. But more on that after this. You're listening to North Coast Underground, where the underground starts with you. Hey, what's going on? JC Johnson here, and you're listening to For the Love of Wisdom, where philosophy meets the streets. And we're going to conclude our conversation for today on organism. So we looked at an article that talked about the church, and it talked about the differences between a church that's an organization versus one that's an organism. And I think that they did an awesome job of breaking that down. And I think that that's something that really can apply to a lot of different aspects of life as well. So definitely take heed to that. I think it was a pretty good article. Again, if you want to read more about that, you can go to onelordonebody.com, and they gave a pretty good breakdown there. So what does the Bible have to say about this whole idea of, an organism versus an organization, or more of a family type of atmosphere as it relates to us? Well, one thing it says in Hebrews chapter 10, verses 24 and 25, it says that we should think about each other to see how we can encourage each other to show love and do good works. We must not quit meeting together as some are doing, but we need to keep on encouraging each other. So what is this saying here? This is saying that when it comes to being an organism, a living, breathing organism, as opposed to just being another religious organization, because there's thousands of those, right? But when you're a true organism, when you're a true family, it says that you're going to encourage other people. You're going to love people. You're going to do good works for the right reasons, right? You're not going to you're always going to make time to meet together, right? So that doesn't just mean, going to a church service on a Sunday. You show up, you feel like, I'm punching my time card. I'm going to go in there. I'm going to listen to a sermon. I'm going to, maybe sing some songs, and I'm going to go home. But no, it's not talking about that. It's talking about really meeting together to do what it's saying here. Encourage one another. Show love to one another. Do good works. That's the point of it all. That's what it's supposed to be about. And there are some people who are turned away from the church because they feel like that's not what's going on. They feel like, man, they just want my money. And if they talk about the offering one more time, I'm going to throw that basket when it comes around to me, right? So some people have a problem with that, and for good reason, I think, because that's not what it's supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about so much more than that. But unfortunately, there are some places that put too much of an emphasis on that and less of an emphasis on the family aspect. This whole idea of the church being a living, breathing organism. 1 Timothy chapter 5, verses 1 and 2 says, "Don't speak angrily to an older man, but talk to him as if he were your father. Treat the younger men like brothers. Treat the older women like mothers, and treat the younger women with respect like sisters." And this is talking about the same thing, and really just, it talks about our relationships with other people, and basically saying we need to have respect for people, right? So it says, don't speak angrily to an older man. It's talking about having respect for our elders, especially because, if this is a family, in order for it to operate as a true family or organism as opposed to just an organization, we need to speak respectfully to each other. Now, in business, business can be really cutthroat, and, you see some really intense business meetings where everyone's in the boardroom. Maybe, the CEO is cursing people out because they didn't meet their deadlines and whatever. But this is saying here that might work in that kind of organization, but within an organism such as what the church is supposed to be, that kind of stuff just doesn't fly. You need to respect each other, especially when someone is older than you. You need to respect them as your elder, if nothing more than that. It says that you should talk to him as if he were your father. It says that you should, if you're an older person, or maybe you're talking to someone who's your age, right? It says you treat the younger men like brothers, right? So you treat this person as if they were your brother, and assuming that you have a good relationship with your brother, not a bad relationship. This is talking about, again, something positive. This is saying treat the older women like mothers. So in the same sense that you would treat an older man like a father, it's saying you should treat older women like they were your mother. And you should treat the younger women with respect like sisters. And this is a big one, especially for us men, because we can easily forget that we have a responsibility to treat young ladies with respect. And you hear about all types of scandals and things going on where people are using women for physical benefits. Maybe, it's because of sex, or because they're using their strength and their masculinity to put women down. And this is saying here that you shouldn't do that. But whenever you're speaking with a young lady, you should treat her the same way that you would treat your sister. You should see her in that way. She's not an object. She's not someone for you to run over, but she is someone who is worthy of your respect, just as you are worthy of hers. So this is some really good information here that we can get from the Word of God, and really it speaks to every situation. And that's why I always go to it as the thing to wrap things up, because I think that it puts things into perspective. So that's all we have for today. Thank you for tuning in. You're listening to For the Love of Wisdom, where philosophy meets the streets. And we'll be back next week, Thursday at 4 o'clock on North Coast Underground, where the underground starts with you.
Fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. If you want it, come and get some. Because we love wisdom. Because we love wisdom. Fear of God is the beginning of wisdom.